we are designed, humans are made to connect and to love, and not just in the joyful moments, which are important, don't get me wrong, but also we need each other in the moments when we have all this self-doubt and struggle and pain and hurt and loss. That is the place where love really comes alive. Connecting couples with the real Imhoffs. Hi, I'm Chad Imhoff.
And I'm Angela Imhoff, and we're so excited that you're joining us for our first podcast series, The Basics.
Yeah, we're going to dive into kind of the most basic of the basics, since this is our first one, and just kind of talk about how love works. Like, what is it that happens here? You know, a long time ago, people were talking about like, oh, it's a bargain, or it's a bond, or it's all these things, you know, or they said it was bargains, but somebody that I really respect, Sue Johnson, said, no, this is a bond. And so when we talk about love, we're going to talk a little bit about what bonds are and how they're made. Yeah,
I'm excited because this is our first one. And so we wanted to kind of bring the format back up to you. If you've missed our introduction, that actually was our first podcast that we did of this series. Just kind of introduce ourselves and let you know why we're passionate about this and what makes us think we're even qualified, which we don't, by the way, but we're doing it anyway because we feel the need. So we love that you're here with us, and what we're going to do is pitch the topic. Like this podcast, part one of the basics is how love works, which Chad just said. We're going to talk about that for a little bit, and then we're going to kind of share a story that is the application of that. We're going to kind of give you an example from our lives, and then we're going to throw it to you and actually cue up what we're going to call a connect point. We want couples to connect. That's the name of the podcast, Connecting Couples. And so we're going to cue up those connect points on each 20-minute segment. So we're excited. Let's dive right in.
Yeah. So when I think about love, and you guys, I'm sorry, I'm not a huge romantic. I'm not.
He makes fun of me when I watch romantic comedies.
I can't
make fun
watch
of them when
he's
in the room.
Talk about it. You know, I'm like, oh my gosh,
So
really?
cynical.
I wonder if she's going to get the rich guy. Let's see what happens.
We've
Anyway,
both been hurt. We're a
little
cynical.
jaded at times, but I don't think of love as this kind of like crazy romantic thing that nobody could ever understand or some. I think love actually, and this is part of why I like the theories that I like, is because love makes sense, right? It gives us a place to go to in moments of joy. Where we win, where we have someone to greet us and say, congratulations, and I'm with you, and I'm excited for you. It gives us a place to go in moments of pain when we're hurting and we need somebody to console us. It gives us a place to know that we're accepted when we fail, and to know that we're loved when the rest of the world kind of says that we're not, right? And so that I think of as not so romantic in my mind. Maybe it sounds sweet right now, But I actually think of it as like something that our brain needs.
A little more logical the way you put it.
Well, it's something that our brain goes, oh my gosh, if I'm not okay, and how do I make sense of myself in this world, right? I make sense of it through the feedback that I receive. Our brains are wired to do these things so quickly, to pay attention to feedback. So I receive feedback in this world, and I need a safe place. I need, as John Bowlby said, a secure base to know that I'm okay. And adult attachment says that if you have a secure base, if we have a secure relationship, a secure bond, that we are actually more likely to go out and explore the world and engage in the world and play and have a good time. And so when I start thinking about love and how it works, it's not this funny thing that's sentimental or something. It's actually like, this is our safety. This is our protection. This is our place where we go and kind of know that we're okay, and kind of how we define who we are and what we do.
You'll get to know us as we go, but as Chad is talking about the very, logical and pragmatic way to approach love, I'm over here going, oh, that's my husband. He's so smart. He's cute. And I think,
she was smiling at me.
I'm definitely the romantic person of the two of us. And it's such an interesting thing, the way we approach this, because I feel like I was very much that American girl growing up in our culture where the media says, this is what Disney says, this is what love is, that this Prince Charming is going to come and he's going to sweep you off your feet. He's going to slay dragons for you, and you're going to live happily ever after. And
it's kind of what happened.
Yeah, it is a little bit. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But the reality is that So many couples go into their relationship thinking they know what love is, and then they're disappointed because expectations aren't met and they have a hard time communicating. That word gets thrown out so much when people come to therapy. We don't communicate well, and that's really tragic because we're not set up to actually be able to be there for each other in these really authentic and vulnerable places. We actually long for, as humans, to feel safe in these connections. We long for somebody to see us. And, Chad and I are, we facilitate Creative for Connections. We both are faith-based, and so we can't leave that out of this podcast, but we definitely wanted to be a broader podcast to just really appeal to couples of all, races, faiths, all the things. And so part of it was like, how do we include it? And so I kind of preface it by saying, for me, that biblical concept of shame, where it says they were naked and they felt no shame in the garden at the very beginning. That idea there is physical. And a lot of times when we do premarital, people talk about, oh, that's the sex part. But it's going to be fun when we get married and we're going to get to have sex, and that's great. But so many times we miss having the intentional emotional conversations where we're emotionally naked, where I'm able to bear my deepest fears with you, or my deepest insecurities with you, or those places where I feel the most vulnerable, and you can see those and accept me in those spaces. That's what we long for. That's where we're drawn to someone who we think is going to accept us. And so many times we also keep our protection up, which keeps it hard for us to connect. And so we're going to get into a little bit more of this, but we just kind of wanted to pitch how we are connected to each other, even though there are very real, we're physically attracted, we're intellectually attracted, there are things
compatible, family of origin. I mean, there's 100 things that factor into that.
Things that we both find value in. If those align, we are drawn towards each other. If we have common, hobbies and stuff, we're drawn to each other. And so there's a lot of things that draw us. But deep down, the longing that we have, that's a very human longing, is for safety and connection in some of those really vulnerable places.
Yeah, for sure. And so, and this is, I could go really broad with this, and so maybe I will, but it makes sense, even if we pull back from the faith component and we don't say, oh, well, God created us to connect, and that if we were staying in that faith vein, God saw that we had sin. It wasn't Adam and Eve wasn't a mistake. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, how'd the snake get in there? Like, God knew that people were going to have flaws and hurt and need one another, and that's so important to remember from a faith background place, right? That we are not perfect beings, and we will miss, and we need to find ways to give each other grace and love. And when we do, that creates the bond that God's talking about, or that the Bible is talking about, or that we're talking about actually. And science kind of proves that out. And so mammals inherently seek herds. So they seek packs for safety. And the way that they know that they're doing okay is they have a pack. They have their herd around them. They have a relationship in order to kind of like stay safe. And science and research has shown over and over and over that people that are in close relationship, that have secure bonds, that have secure relationships, they live longer, they are more resilient to cancer, they're more resilient to loss. Actually, people that, and there's a story that maybe we'll tell one of these times, but people that struggle with things like cancer, the loss of a spouse, right? When they go through and they're able to have these hard conversations and talk about the places where they've missed, they actually grieve better. So even to lose someone, once you've known them in a deep way, you do better on the other side of loss. So it is so clear, whether you're looking at it from a biblical perspective or you're looking at it from an evolutionary standpoint, we are designed, humans are made to connect and to love, and not just in the joyful moments, which are important, don't get me wrong, but also we need each other in the moments when we have all this self-doubt and struggle and pain and hurt and loss. That is the place where love really comes alive. That is the place where the power of relationship really kind of comes online and kind of changes the way that we experience ourselves, others, and the pain that we have to live
I love
through.
some of the work that Jim Cohn does. He's a researcher, and if you want to check out, he's got an amazing TED Talk called Why We Hold Hands. But the basis of it is that if I am connected to my partner and I'm actually holding his hand, then I feel my pain less because he's bearing that burden with me. And also, if I feel that he's in pain, my body actually registers administers that pain because I care about him. That actually when we're together, we are stronger and we have a bond there that helps us be able to go through hard things together in a better way than if we were alone. And so that's we just kind of wanted to pitch out why we connect and why whether you want to go to the romantic side, the attraction side, or what we're trying to really start pitching is deep down the longing that we have to not be alone, to connect with somebody who accepts us in those places. Yep. One of the reasons we want to start the podcast, that we want to do this podcast, is not to pitch how great love is. We all will say love is great, but it's really to help navigate when love goes wrong. When
love is great when it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When love isn't enough, sadly. And you know, I hate to even kind of say it like that because we love each other, but we just get in really wretched fights, or we loved each other, but we still ended up getting a divorce. You know, I think about my first marriage. I loved my ex-husband. He's my high school sweetheart. We married, we committed to each other for life. And yet it went really, really wrong to a place where we didn't feel like we could overcome all of the pain and hurt that we had caused each other. And that sucks. And Chad and I, with the couples that we work with, we see that so often that couples will come in and go, we love each other. Nobody walks down the aisle on the day of their wedding thinking about how it's going to go wrong. They think about how great the love is and how connected that they feel. And so we want to talk for a second about when it goes wrong, kind of how that feels and why that is so hard in a relationship when we start to doubt that the love is there because it's hard to feel it when we're in those hardest spots.
Yeah. And so we'll spend a little bit of time kind of thinking about that. You know, the reason it hurts so bad when love goes wrong is because we are designed, we are created, or have evolved to work in relationship. One of the things that we've done and kind of can be shown, and there's lots of research on this again, but I think it was Prophet, a guy, but he did a research on guys looking at a hill, and if you look at the hill alone and have this pack on your back, it's like 600 times more or 60% more steep. Like they rate the hill to be that much harder. They never even had the people go up the hill. They just did glucose levels. But the interesting thing is if you have a partner, you have a friend there with you, the hill doesn't seem as steep. It seems simpler. It seems easier. You believe you could do it. You don't think it's going to be as hard. Like they had all these measures that they used. But that's true for us. So if I have a close relationship, and I do, I hope, with my wife, Angela.
It's secure.
It's a secure bond today, even though we set all this up. But if I have this secure bond and then all of a sudden I get a message, because my body and my brain are always kind of looking for threat, right? They're always kind of scanning, kind of going, how are we doing? How are we doing? How am I doing here? How am I doing out here in the world? And so we've got this brain that kind of does this kind of without our knowledge. It's almost like autonomic. It's underneath, right? I don't have to think about breathing. I don't have to think about my heartbeat. I don't have to think about my security in relationship either. I don't have to worry too much about my herd, so to speak. Yeah. And so my brain's looking for it. And whenever I know there's a threat here, my body kind of freaks out a little bit. And most people's does. And when I say most, I'd say 99%. Like if I know that the person I care about the most is either displeased or upset or distant from me, my body goes, uh-oh, that's not good. And it should, because the way that we've learned and found to stay safe is very predictable. We come together. Okay, am I okay? Yeah, you're okay. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay, you're okay. Isn't that a book from like the 80s? Anyway, but it kind of is a little bit like that idea that it says, hey, are we all right? And so when we are not all right, our body does whatever it's been trained to do. Yeah. And we all grew up in families. We all grew up around people. And so my body will go, hey, whoa, something's not right. And for me, I'm a withdrawer. So I like to, and by withdrawer, it just means what is my strategy in those moments when things go wrong? Yeah. Right. And that's if you're thinking about, hey, I want to classify myself as something, that's a way you can classify yourself. You can say, in the moment when I see that look on my wife's face, I know a very specific thing that she does with her lip. It kind of goes like purses. I don't know if you can probably hear it better than you can see it. I got a mustache, but when she does that, my body goes, uh-oh, right? My gut kind of drops and I say, something's wrong. Yeah. I'm in trouble. I'm going to have to change it. And then what I do is very predictable. It's what I've learned to do really my whole life, right? It's kind of to shut down what I feel, which actually takes me away from my ability to connect, and then kind of go to my head and do some like logical problem solving, or like, what did I do? Did I forget this? Did I not take the trash out? Did I who knows what the thing could be, but I start doing some things, right? And that actually cues something for Angela.
Yeah. So for me, on the flip side of that, when we're trying to have a conversation and I know in my body it's going fine, and then all of a sudden something shifts and it's not, something that cues me is if he slow blinks. You know, he just said, I do something with my lips. You know, the interesting part is that Chad and I, because we've studied this stuff, have really slowed down when we get in those stuck spots and those distressing moments. And so our hope is eventually, as we continue with this podcast, to start giving you tools to be able to know not only, which you probably already do, but not only know, the tone just shifted in this conversation, but also how to slow it down and possibly even prevent it from completely derailing. And so that will come later, but just now as we're kind of pitching it to you. So when Chad slow blinks, my body goes, he's starting to go away. And then I get this like really high energy to fight hard with a lot of words and a lot of articulation and a lot of like, I just kind of start coming at him. And when I bring that energy to him, guess what it causes him to do? Want to get further away, which makes me
or give her reasons or do whatever she's saying. I mean, there's lots of things that kind of, as we play through this is what we would call our cycle.
Yeah.
Right?
And we'll explain more of these words and some of the terms that we're going to use further. But really in this first, the part one of the basics, we're talking about how love works. Even though we love each other, we still have these distressing moments, and our bodies come to the table with a strategy to keep us safe, right? Safety is built into the longing that we have to connect with one another. And so right there with my longing to connect with Chad is also my body's protection that says, hey, if he sees your weakness, or if he sees you get too crazy, or if he sees something happen, he's going to leave. So you have to self-regulate to not be too much, or on his side, he has to self-regulate to not go away too far, but to stay close enough. Like we both.
And really I do that by saying, hey, I'll come up with an answer, something that will solve your distress.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really, I never come forward with that vulnerable part of me that says, oh, I feel really bad that I might have let you down or I might have done something wrong. Instead, I go to my head, which then leaves her in her own emotional kind of state. And I don't mean that to be, when I say emotional, I don't mean, emotional lady from like Robin Hood.
Although I am an emotional lady sometimes.
Emotional lady.
Oh, emotional lady.
That's funny. But
that's Robin Hood, the cartoon from the
64 or 70
because our daughter is binge watching it right now.
Anyway, but it's not that I'm saying, oh, you're we're all emotional beings. Of course we are. That's how our body
God
registers.
designed us to be emotional.
How we're doing in the world and how our body's doing. And so when we talk about emotion, we could probably do a whole segment on that, but we really just mean, how are you doing? How is your body doing? Yeah. And interestingly, how we're doing in relationship is really tied to how physically our body is doing.
Yeah.
They're so closely connected. There is a slight difference, and there are some studies about that, but they're almost the same. How we experience pain and how we experience emotional pain or distance from our loved ones is very, very similar.
So even though we love each other, we still get sideways in these conversations because our protection almost fights against our longing sometimes. And so in order to overcome it, we've got to really be mindful of what's happening in our body and then learn the words to articulate that to our partner so that they can understand in that space, because we want people with us in those struggles, even though our body says not to. And so this is our first part one of the basics, how love works. And we've kind of explained it, given some examples of our own. And now this is the part where we kind of pitch it to you because we want to give you a connect point. So before we dive into the rest of the basics series, where we're going to talk about pursuers, we're going to talk about withdrawers, we're going to talk about cycles, like we've mentioned a little bit in this first one. We're going to really break those down a little bit more in the upcoming podcast that we're going to do. Before we do that, we want to just take you back to that time when you knew your partner was the one. You know, you guys, maybe you were dating, or maybe it was the first time you met, or maybe it was like with Chad and I, we both come to the table with woundedness. And so that protection we were talking about showed up and tried to sabotage a few times and tried to prevent us from getting hurt again. And so we had to acknowledge that. And so we want you to have a connect point with your partner. And if you can, kind of think about when you knew your partner was the person that you wanted to spend the rest of your life with, and what was that moment? And can you share that with your partner and let them know, hey, I just thought about this today, maybe because blame us. I listened to this podcast that queued it up for me, but I just was reminded when I knew you were the one, And I wanted to share that with you just as a reminder that we have love, that we care for each other, that we committed to each other. And this was the moment when I knew you're the person that I want to go through life with.
Great. We're going to wrap this up. We're right at our hard stop. But we appreciate you guys. Take the time to think about that, to think about when did you know your spouse, your partner was the one, and spend some time sharing that with each other. Thanks for listening to us.